I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Rose Highbear, and I am Alaskan Dene. We are, you can't, oh, okay, I have a little hard time projecting my voice, but maybe you could come a little closer to us too. We introduce ourselves by introducing our grandmothers. And so my grandmother, Sophie Vanderpool, was born just before the turn of the century in Anvik, Alaska, which is on the Yukon River, up in the Arctic region, just up around the Arctic Circle. And she was one of only around 172 elders at that time, back in the 70s, who still spoke fluent Ingalic dialect of the Athabaskan language. And during her lifetime, she didn't speak a lot within her own family because her husband, who was Dutch, forbid her from speaking and teaching the language and the culture to their family. And so she agreed to that, but she hardly ever learned to speak the English language. She was simply silent a lot around her own family. But she was a beautiful example. We have a beautiful family. She had 9 children, and my mother, Rose Winkleman, had 9 children. And so I'm very proud to be Athabaskan, Alaskan Dene. We're related to the Navajo, the Apache, and many of these Northwest coastal people. And across Canada, we're related also to the Cree and some of the other nations that go toward the east there. It was a couple of years ago when I started doing my work that I was told to do almost 10 years ago to write this book about Martin Highbear. The spirits had told me I was going to be doing this book of his life. And he told me, well, I don't think so. That was never our people's way. We always followed the oral tradition. And so I acquiesced, and we formed the corporation Wisdom of the Elders and began working, instead of the book, we began working on a documentary project. And he ran Sundances, and he was constantly traveling around the country doctoring people, following his own instructions. And so we didn't have a lot of time to put together a documentary. We also found out it was very expensive. And so we just got a little bit of work done. We recorded him over the years. We have a number of audio and video recordings. But no work was done on the book until just maybe within the last few months before he crossed over. He gave me permission to work on the book. He said, well, maybe it'll be okay. He had seen that some of his own people had begun to write books. Matthew King wrote Noble Red Man. And so he began to feel, well, maybe this is something I need to look at, and he gave me permission to do it. And so after he had crossed over, I was given a fellowship to kind of go into seclusion, as I was in seclusion anyway, but I was given a Native American fellowship to go to Vermont, kind of just in the late part of the winter time, and work on the book. And they asked me for a resume. And I remember that our people, when we introduce ourselves, we always introduce our grandma. And so I wrote, and I had never in my life been a writer, but I wrote this piece because they also wanted 10 pages of writing. And I had never written really in my life either. And so I had to come up with some things, came up with a newsletter we'd put out from our corporation. And this resume came to me, a resume of my grandmother. And I just ran across it last night and read it for the first time in maybe a year or two. And if you all will allow me to indulge myself, I'd like to share this with you. If I can find it here. There it is. Hope I can see all right. The thunderous crack of spring ice resonates from the riverbank, a sound that signals the alert to evacuate. Most villagers have already traveled by dog sled to spring hunting camps, leaving only a handful to witness this year's breakup. They've prepared for the raging flood of subarctic water, ice, silt, and debris to twist its deadly way through the lower reaches of this small, deserted Dene village, imperiling foundations of humble dwellings and all else that lies in its path. Spring flooding. It's part of the rhythm of life on the eroding, constantly changing banks of this great subarctic river, the Kuskokwim. Our elders come to know the river, their grandmother, as she endlessly weaves her way past our village. They spend their days listening to her, watching her, traveling on her, and feeling her many moods and seasons. She flows mercifully and mercilessly hundreds of miles downstream through the valley beneath the Alaska mountain range, where she enters the Bering Sea. On this clear, warm day in May, the remaining villagers move swiftly. They know what to do. They've predicted this time of ice breakup for thousands of years. So as they take the last of their belongings to higher ground with uphill relations, they patiently wait to behold what the river has in store for them this season. And as the flood of ice and gushing water races past below them, the people feel relieved that this time grandmother has been compassionate with her children. Only the lowest portions of the village have washed away, and very little riverbank is lost. Families living in lower parts of Old McGrath will return from spring hunting camp without heavy loss from this year's breakup. The ice jams will gradually clear, and soon the returning families will set up fish camp once again. By early June, the people will be putting out fish traps, smoking their fish, gathering roots, berries, and medicines, and fortifying winter dwellings and food caches in preparation for a hard winter that comes too soon. The grandmothers vigilantly tend fire beneath the fish racks at river's edge as their men and children depart and return day after day, fishing, hunting, gathering. They bring their grandchildren to the shore and raise them to learn of this way, so they can know this power that gives the people life and then swiftly takes it away. My full-blooded Alaskan Dene grandmother, Sophie, traveled to Old McGrath in the early part of this century. She traveled by dog sled from her birthplace, Anvik, up on the Yukon River with her Dutch husband, William Vanderpoel, the territory's new constable. He didn't know Dene tradition, that the woman doesn't leave her ancestral village. So they settled in Old McGrath and raised 9 children, 50 grandchildren, and many more great-grandchildren. Grandmother was among 170 natives who fluently spoke English dialect of Athabascan. When her husband forbid her from teaching her language and culture to the family, she was obedient, but rarely used his language, the English language. Suppression of indigenous heritage, though a common occurrence this last century throughout the North American continent, did not succeed in taking the Indian out of this grandmother. Transcending syllable and sound, her redeeming qualities shone through and had a quiet but commanding effect on all the generations following her mucklucks. Dene ancestors, ancient migrating inhabitants of the subarctic, kept our heritage pure for centuries as we shared this vast tundra wilderness with few outsiders. The grizzlies and Dall sheep of the mountains, the migrating caribou, and the wolves of the foothills, and the moose and other four-leggeds, and of course the mosquito nation that lived along the forested waters. These were our closest neighbors. By the turn of the century we live in, only the most courageous of missionaries, the most ambitious of traders, and the most enthusiastic of the miners had ventured this far into our homeland. Raven, another ancient inhabitant, watched over the river and his people from generation to generation and imparted love, wisdom, protection, and hard lessons to all of his children. This black winged creature, shrewd trickster, yet the one chosen to speak for Creator, perched just above the cemetery and eloquently eulogized my grandmother in 1983 as she began her final journey home to the spirit world. This is the resume of my grandmother. So I really love my grandmother. I was 4.5 when I left the village up in McGrath. I was brought outside by my father, who was white, and after a divorce in the family, he felt that I needed an education and to be raised by his side of the family, and so they didn't consult with me, and so I came outside, as we call it. Whenever we leave Alaska, we're going outside. And I lived there for more than 20 years, and had a pretty heavy dosage of what you would call abandonment syndrome. I think 99% of our people suffer from this abandonment syndrome that goes through our people's villages, our reservations. But I endured. My spirituality was stronger because I love my village, I love my grandmother, my family, I love my culture, and I returned to it after my father died. I went back to Alaska and found that my mother was still living. I had 8 brothers and sisters, and so I have a beautiful family in Alaska. I met Martin Heiber back in the early 80s, but I never really spoke to him until after I had had a vision. And they had told me that I needed to speak with him about that, and so he told the people to tell me that I needed to go up on the hill, and that's how my relationship with him started. He told me to prepare to go up on Lakota Vision Quest. And our people don't really have a formal ritualized vision quest. We simply leave the village and we go and we eat the root of Devil's Club for a while, and we stay up on the hill, just certain hills. And so I hadn't planned really to have a Lakota of Appalachia, but I did. And I was grateful for his guidance. He gave a lot of guidance to thousands of people over the years. People on this Turtle Island, and even people over in other parts of the world, Tibet and over in Europe and different places. He was a man who was misunderstood because he followed the teachings of his instructions of his grandfathers. His little grandfathers told him to leave the reservation and go help the people. You know, our people became urbanized over the last few decades. We left our reservations to find economic development of some kind, and so many of our people are off reservations now. Well, the grandfathers told him to leave the reservations, and so he led quite a life of hardship traveling. It wasn't easy. There were times when he would be gifted a star quilt, and then he'd sell that star quilt for $20 to get gas money to go to Montana or wherever he was called, because sometimes somebody was sick and their family wouldn't always have gas money for him. And so that's how he got around, and the grandfathers always took care of him, but it was a life of hardship for him. So I think there was times he longed for his own language, he longed for the music of his people, he longed for the culture that he kind of could only see when he was traveling through to help somebody. And so I look at my life with him during his sunsetting years, which was very short. It was 7 years long. And I feel very honored that I was able to learn, and especially that I was able to take on these 7 commandments that he taught. They came to him in a vision. And it seems as though that year taking care of his spirit and this project I was given to write the book of his life kept evolving in front of me, and I would look ahead of me and not know what was happening, but it kept unfolding until we are here today, and we are helping this cultural preservation project that was formed back in 1992. We are helping to preserve our grandparents' stories, their teachings, so that these young people today who maybe they don't have parents, they don't have grandparents who can teach them these things, they'll have a role model through this modern technology that they have, the TV, the video, and all that. We have to use that. I know up in Alaska, we had a hard time in Alaska. And in the early 1900s, they brought up to Alaska what they called a fish wheel. We'd always caught fish one by one. And here comes the fish wheel. And it goes round and around in the river, and all these fish come up, and we were able to feed our dog teams. We were able to feed our people through the winter, and we had a lot of fish. And so we said, well, now this is tradition for us. You know, this fish wheel is now part of our fishing tradition because it's helping our people. And so I guess we can say that this modern technology, in the same way, it's becoming part of our tradition because it's capturing the museums which are our elders, and it's preserving it. They've done a lot of work on this reservation, and I think some of the other reservations have done some beautiful work. University of South Dakota has thousands of oral histories recorded. The archives in Pierre have a lot of memories, a lot of stories preserved, and so we're kind of helping out here, finding more unchis, more grandmas and more grandpas that are willing to share some of those values. This project is focusing on values. We're not focusing so much on battles and focusing on events that happened, except as to show how it is that our grandparents endured, how it is that our character was strengthened, our spirituality was stronger because of those tests. It's showing how they lovingly raised their children, how they had that connectedness, that sense of belonging with family, so that we can rebuild our families again, so that our people will be stronger, our families will be stronger, and our communities, our Tioshbayes will be stronger. And so that's why I'm so grateful as I look around the room today and I see that you have been willing. I know you're all so busy, but you've all been willing to come and spend time with us and help us, as we're pitiful. Even our remote mic has to be put together with Scotch tape. It's kind of road weary. We were in an accident on the way over, going through northern Cheyenne at 11:30 at night, and why I was traveling so late, I have no idea, but we totaled our van out, and we're very sad that we killed a cow, but we were protected, because I guess the grandfather wanted us to do this project. They protected us. All the glass went out. None of it came in. Because we must have been traveling 30, 40 miles an hour when we hit. I don't know why we weren't hurt. I got a couple scratches right here on my chin, but I think it's because the grandfathers, they want this to happen. And so I just say, Pilamie, Wopila, to all of you for helping us today. I want to take off this little microphone, if I can keep it in one piece and pass it around so that we can all introduce ourselves. Can I help put this on you?
No. How about like this?
Oh, okay.
What am I supposed to do?
Introduce yourself.
Oh,
Just introduce
yeah. I'm Leonard Bruguier, and you know, and looking at us as Native peoples, and it seems like I live in a modern world, but I have all these other ideas too, and some. I guess what really attracted me to this was that the breakup of the families. I think I always say that parents. Can you hear it? Parents and grandmas and grandpas have sort of abrogated their duties as Indian people, and now we're at a stage where our children are being raised like Washichus. You know, they're in daycare centers and these kinds of things. And I've always thought that I don't know if we can go back, but boy, we sure lost something. The other thing is that when we do interviews and things, we always look at the urban versus the reservation communities. But even the reservation communities now are turning like the urban communities where people drive to work and drop their kids off at school and those kinds of things. So I think that while we can maintain these values, we have to also recognize who we are today, and we're an evolving people, just like, especially our Sioux people. You know, we developed those survival techniques, and we're surviving. So that's kind of where I'm at today on this particular project. I don't think there are any answers. You know, we're historians and those kinds of things, and we can look at it and we can say, boy, back in the old days it was really good. Well, depends on how far you went back in the old days. When I was growing up, we never had food. Food was hard to get, and I'm not so sure that those are good days. But today I'm just Chepa and living off the fat of the land and stuff, so I don't know how that's going. But I'm particularly interested in finding more ways to publish and bring to the world women's roles in Indian society. You know, we're still in that stage where when people study Indians, they study Indian men, and we all know that half of the Indians, or at least half, were women. So that's a story that isn't told, and actually it isn't half. I always think it in terms of thirds, because you have the children. The children have to be factored into that too. So I think it's a good project. I think we can. I'm looking forward to seeing some of the some more information come out. I can't think of anything more to say.
Do it. We're going to say, who are you?
Oh, oh, you mean where I come from?
Who you are.
Gee.
Okay, tell us.
Oh boy.
Dakota Lena.
Yeah. Well, I always think in terms of. With me, I probably have a lot of different bloods going through me, different races of people. But where the Bruguiers come from, I'll start there. Theophile Bruguier married War Eagle. He come from Montreal into St. Louis and then up to about Sioux City, where Sioux City is today. And War Eagle, he came from Minnesota. He's Badiwa Kantomo. And he was down in Sioux City, so he lived down there. And Theophile came into this country, and they were both immigrants. You know, they were immigrants because at that time the Hunktomas were living in that Iowa area and Nebraska and what became Dakota, South Dakota. So that's really where I come from. And then Theophile married into the Indian families, and my particular branch of the family, we stayed on the Ehunktowa reservation, what became the Ehunktowa reservation. But then some of my great uncles came up to here and to Standing Rock, and then over to Fort Peck, and then over to Pine Ridge, and then married into those people too. So always, you know, when I come here, I know I'm kind of at home because I have relatives here. But I always also think in respect terms, that when I come here, I have to be, have to consider myself a visitor to these places, so that they don't look down on me and then my relatives that live here in those places I go to. So that's about it, I think. And personally, I was born in '44 and on our allotment, and we still have our allotment too, the Bruguier allotment, and I'll probably retire there too when I'm done working. And then in the '50s, we moved into town so I could go to school. So that we moved into Yankton, which is kind of nice. I was a Yankton in Yankton, and then I did that and graduated from high school and went in the Marine Corps and got out and lived out in Portland, Oregon for about 10 years. I have some relatives out there. And then I wanted to come home, so I came back to South Dakota, and what I did out there wasn't really a lot of jobs here. So then I went back to school and got my degrees, and now I'm working down at the University of South Dakota. Having a lot of fun. Having a lot of fun. How about that much? I heard a good joke too. I got it. And this one came from Little Eagle too, I think, or the chairman up there, standing up. He said, "There's now Indians have to face 4 BCs: before Christ, before Columbus, before Custer, and before casinos."
I thought you would say before Clinton.
Jim, would you be willing to introduce yourself here? So go
Yeah.
down.
Come on, you guys.
Come sit. There's a chair there. All of you should come and sit at the table here.
Yeah.
Let me move my
My name is Jim Picotte, and I'm the director here at the Cultural Center. I guess I grew up here most of my life. I have family in Yankton and also up here in Little Eagle and all over the country. But I guess my grandmother's Dorothy Clark, and she's not here today, but I believe that she's going to be helping out on this project also. I grew up about 32 miles southeast of here at my grandmother's or my grandparents' place, and I know we spent some time here in Eagle Butte during the school years, but I always say I grew up out there because that's where my heart was. And Eagle Butte was the place where all the pain and suffering happened, I guess. So you had to go to school. And I guess that's about it. I've been the director here at the Cultural Center for, I guess, the past 5 years, going on 6 years. And it's really been interesting and a challenge for me. Before I got this position, I was a construction worker. I guess at a young age, my grandmother had taken me to one of the first sun dances that was held in Greengrass. And I guess in growing up, you know, there was just things that pulled me towards that. And, you know, I guess Greengrass and the Sundance down there has been a part of my life since I was young. And that really helped me to, I guess, understand who I am and where I came from. And I guess it's the cultural awareness, I guess growing up, before that, I never really had experienced any of those things. But the older I got, the more that I was able to experience, I guess the traditional teachings and the traditional, I guess, way of life, and what we refer to as Lakoichoka. And now that I'm older, looking back on my younger years, and the values and things that my grandparents had taught me were not necessarily said that these are the Lakota ways, but these are just, the ways, these are the morals and values that I want you to learn. And not necessarily directly saying that, but by the things that they did, and the ways that they lived their life, and the morals and values that they lived by. And, realizing that in our everyday lives, these values are used, these values are carried on. And not really saying that this is Lakota, but this is, the way of life, and the way that we live it as far as being good human beings. And so I attribute my grandparents to, the person that I am today, and the things that they've shown me. And I don't really say taught, because they've really, I think of teaching as preaching, and my grandparents never really preached to me, and they more or less taught by doing, and more or less taught by examples and the stories that they told of their life experiences, the things that their parents and their grandparents had told them. And in that way, I guess teaching, I guess, a way of life, and the things that are dear to us, and make us who we are. And with that, I'd like to thank you for letting me do that.
The name Picotte, I always thought it was a Louisiana name, like more from where
It is.
So how did your people get it?
My grandpa Picotte worked for the Bureau, and he was at the Cheyenne Agency, and that's how my mother met my father.
Oh, so your mother then is from here.
Yeah. And I guess my father never really lived down there. He's pretty much grew up in this area. And I'd never been to Yankton in that area in my life until, maybe 5 years ago.
So then which family is your mother connected to?
My mother is, her name is Carol Clark, or that's her maiden name.
Clark.
And my grandmother's maiden name is Walters.
Was what?
Walters.
Walters.
And I guess through that we have relatives up in I guess Standing Rock as well as here.
You don't want to know. You don't want to know what's each visitor interviewed on this, do you?
Everybody.
Basically who we are and what we're doing here. It's basically who I am and what I'm doing here.
Yeah. FBI.
Yeah, right.
Not like they say, ni tú eres. Who are you?
Who am I?
Tú eres. The way people say they look around. They want to know something,
Yeah. My name is Steve Baggs. I'm born and raised in Yankton, South Dakota, and I'm just a friend of Leonard here, and traveling around a couple of days. And I guess I'm a student of life is what brought me here. I'm in my middle age of going back to school and just still trying to decide what I want to do when I grow up, I guess. I've become very interested in the ways and the cultures of the First Nations peoples. And it's kind of where my focus in academia, I guess, has taken me, is to study the ways of the people who were on this continent long before my people were. And it's been a very enlightening couple of years for me. And, I don't know, I think oftentimes I think I carry some of the scars that have healed over of my ancestors and things and maybe that they have done. People tell me I should not feel that way, that I can't, you know, take the responsibility of my ancestors, but I do. I feel I have to teach some of my peers, my relatives, some of our ways that have been wrong and unjust. And I guess I'm kind of maybe taking on some of that as I get older, trying to enlighten some of my family and friends, and maybe teach a little bit as I learn and share a little bit of things that I'm learning. I'm just real honored to be up in this part of the country, and I've been able to spend some time last month and this month at Standing Rock. I'm just receiving a real education in my middle age, finally. I've always enjoyed history and genealogy and where people came from. And I'm just real pleased to be here. I don't know, that's about all I can really contribute.
Steve, where did you grow up to?
You're my European ancestry? Oh, for many, many generations in this country. On the English side, my oldest immigrant ancestor came over here in about 1750. Many in the mid to late 1600s from England. Some German, Scotch, Irish on my mother's side. So I'm a real Heinz 57 of European descent, I suppose. And there's one lineage that goes into Scotland, and I guess if we go far enough back, there's Anglo and Frank and who knows what all way back there.
You've gone back to what, 1100?
We went back, some that supposedly go back before that, yeah. Back in the 800s.
Was that BC?
Before three of them. Before three of them. Okay.
Amitakuya pileha hiana dero hiwi tapina wonga ka pikta kahelina ichante maashte le wana untue pike o ki I wonga ka pikta kahelina o echun tranka gashehani unchi trankashina ni omhehan duena he dakinktek he Stoliapshni, hena tuepki, hena ogadakapi. Otroka, wanawani tu wikchemena shakpe sam shakoi. Iwahoni na lepta tu kiwana wani tu wikchemena shakpe sam shakdora, henamak shakta. My relatives were gathered here this morning to talk, and I think that's a very, very good thing. I feel very happy about it. And I think back about how we used to hear the people talk a long time ago. And that was always the prime question, who are you? And they would tell that with whomever they were conversing, if it was a stranger. And of course the reason I suppose, was to try to establish some connection with someone. And this talking about who they are was not anything that they hesitated about. And I guess we all are interested in how old we are. And as I said, that I have reached the age of 67, and this fall I will become 68 years old. When I did to a trehani o hantas takuku unspepictana takuku kachni rapictana oksape gekta iapte hechid dakota okachni yohapi. Duena heshe heik jeaka ewichak yapi chimshni. Chahe o hena iwogdakapi ginawach o. Namija hechid ungnash awachamik ashindehan dokidok ompe gidina trokcha. Naha duena wana heka et kaya yaki he o ogdaka chimshni. And you know, as we think about ourselves and who we are, we always have to think that we've lived all this time on this earth and we've occupied this much space, we've used up that much oxygen, eaten that much food, etc. And we should be growing in understanding, wisdom, and knowledge, because the old ancestors always used to say, nobody wanted it said about them, oh, they're just old. But it seems that, you know, we kind of have this thing about the way, the world in which we live today, where the idea of youth and looking young, acting young, and so forth is of prime importance. And as a result, we don't often think about that very much. And I guess that's one of the things that I've come to understand more and more as the years come on in my life. And who am I? I know that my mother's name was Helen Margaret C. the Bear, and she came from a long line of practitioners of specializing in women's conditions, women's illnesses. And I am, of course, my mother's child as a good Dakota woman. And following very much in those practices, my mother was an only child. Her father was an only child. Her mother was one of two daughters born into this particular family. And she followed the traditions very closely in that there were 5 years between myself and my brother that's next to me. And I guess I don't know if it's more dramatic or if it's as bad. I always think about that. To be the last one left of a family was my brother and myself, and he left 2 years ago. And it's interesting and also sad to be the last one left in a family. And my mother always used to say, you know, when we were growing up, it's hard to be an only child. But, you know, that's the way that the culture was into her particular group of people, and that somehow in passing those kinds of teachings on is also very interesting. Her father's name was Mathoahanka Hanska, meaning the tall man who sees or who saw the bear. And then her mother's name was Uncharadutawi, which means Regeneration Woman, and my mother's her own name was Wihaktawi, the Loyal One. And my great grandma's name was Ta'ampetuashtewi, Good Day Woman, and she was married to Hechaka Unjija, which was Bobtail Elk, and that's my mother's grandfather, my great grandfather. My grandfather on the father's side of my mother, Matroa Kahaska's father's name was Waihianapare Kiamani, the bear that walks with its head swinging from side to side, and his mother's name was Awachbewi, meaning the leaf woman. And in the true Dakota way, you're supposed to be able to name your generations 4 times back. And that is on my mother's side, which is what I know very well. Na atewa ki he hunku ki hewawia na ko washichu sapa eta upi. And on my father's side, my father's mother was a Hidatsa woman. Her name was Wia Haskish, which is how you say tall woman in Hidatsa. And then her mother's name was Plenty Sweetgrass. Plenty Sweetgrass married a Frenchman named Picotte. And so on that side, then I have French blood, plus the Hidatsa blood. But she came down to the Standing Rock Reservation, a celebration, they say back in before 1890. And while she was there, her brothers gave her to this Hunkpapa man named Defender. So then that is how they got married, and that is how then she stayed on the Standing Rock Reservation. And I always like to tell people about that, because at the time that people did these, we weren't brainwashed like we are today. And we've adopted such weird ways. I guess maybe it's because I'm getting older, I see it that way. But they always be telling people, you're not from here, you're not enrolled here, all those kinds of things. But in her time, she came to the Kennel district, she stayed there, she got an allotment, and she stayed there until she died, which was really the custom. And they're meant to feel that they belong. Because they say when you know you belong, you grew up with a good personality, you grew up to be kind, you grew up to be helpful. All the commandments that the Dakota have, wa'okia, wa'unshida, those kind of good things, those are our commandments. Helpful, be kind. And that's the way you are when you know you belong. So that's the way they treated them. So then that is where she stayed then. And she always used to tell us. So then as a result, when I was growing up, when she told us stories, she told the stories usually in Hidatsa, although she spoke Lakota, the Tetuan dialect of the Lakota language. And I always thought that, you know, some words meant this. Well, they didn't. That was really the Hidatsa language. But it was quite interesting having that kind of a background. And of course, and then living with my mother's own family. And that was quite nice to always have that language around us. And I just think that it's a shame that we kind of are getting away from that. And coming over here, my friend Judy and I had a long talk about cultural shock. And I hope somehow that when we talk to the elders, they will address the area of cultural shock. And I was wishing my friend Judy would come in so she could talk about how she felt when she returned to Standing Rock. She was born there and she moved away, and then she came back, and she said, coming down, we're talking, she said, I was in cultural shock when I returned to the reservation, because you get this image out there, oh, they're so spiritual, they're so nice. I got back to the reservation, nothing could be farther from the truth. And I was telling her, I've lived away from the reservation a lot. I stayed on the reservation until I was 25 years old. I never went to boarding school until my senior year in high school, as I was explaining to Mr. Picotte. Well, the first time I went away to that's my first experience in an Indian school also. Although we lived right on the reservation, right back in the boonies and everything else. But anyway, and then I went away and stayed away pretty much until 1976 when I went back to Standing Rock. That was a cultural shock, somewhat. I stayed there for a while, then I went away to work again, and my last period of working away from the reservation was for 6 years straight. I came back to the reservation a year ago, and believe me, it's been culturally shocking for me to come back there. And I'm not sure what's going on, what the dynamics are, what the influences are, but that exists, is that cultural shock for us. And hopefully, you know, we can look at that and it will then become useful to someone. In my life, I guess I've done a lot of things. We never were very wealthy. It's always meant having to go to work, never having the opportunity to go beyond high school, which I finished at Haskell Institute. But I never went beyond that to school, but went to work and because of the fact I think that I was brought up with all these languages, with all these stories, I could grasp things. So I've always been able to work well and hold very good jobs, and then have really done some very interesting, enriching things for my own life. One of the things I always think about is the fact that I was a performer. When I was a child, you know, well, we'd get these books way back there. We had sheep, so I grew up herding sheep, but somebody would always bring my mother some kind of magazines. And I remember looking at the movie stars. There was Marina Loy and Merle Oberon. Now, to me, they were the epitome of actual beauty, and they were actresses. And I used to ask my mother, okay, what's an actress? And she'd tell me, that's somebody that can pretend they're somebody else and project as someone else. Oh, I want to be an actress. Then I remember when I was at Haskell, when they were asking us our choice of what we wanted to do. I said I wanted to be an actress, and I remember one of the teachers saying, oh, you're not pretty enough, and your legs are too skinny, and so forth. So anyway, that killed that in the bud. So all my life I wanted to be an actress, and I think when I came back to the reservation in 1976, in 1982 I began to work at the community college, and here they sent around this brochure that they were looking for Chautauqua performers. This is from the North Dakota Humanities Council. So I was looking at that and thought, gee, wouldn't I like to be a Chautauqua performer, fulfilling my ambition to be someone else? And my mother's grandmother, this this good day woman, is the one who reared my mother, told my mother all these things about her life, that she'd been a prisoner, taken a prisoner after the Whitestone Hill massacre, which is just north of the South Dakota line, there at a near place called Ellendale back in 1863, how it was to be in this military fort there. And it wasn't right there. I think they took them down to Fort Pierre, is where I think they were taken to, and how her reaction was, how she interpreted the soldiers, and how that was so horrible to her. And she would tell my mother all these things. So I thought, I want to do her, see how it is to be her. So I applied and was chosen to do that. I did that 2 seasons, 2 seasons during the summer months, one year after another, and then have done her off and on ever since that time. She also taught my mother how to treat women's illnesses, how to deliver babies, and so forth. So I think that, you know, I've been fortunate that I've had good experiences in my life. And my last working was at the North Dakota State Hospital. People might think working at a state hospital is very, very kind of terrible. In a way, it is. It's kind of, I can't quite describe how it is to see a person. Tawachi Ganuni, Tawachi is kind of like yourself, a person who has somehow their self has strayed away from them. And that is an awesome experience, but it really helped me validate my respect for my own ancestors, my respect for my people who know what a human being is, what a human being must watch out for, and what it means to be civilized. But I think we'll have a very, very good project here, and that there will be some worthwhile things happening. Thank you very much. Pardon?
You have to quit now.
Oh, come on. Before you start, what the videographer's
Yeah.
Oh, that's your
I know. I don't want to face the camera. How about if I face you?
Down the street.
Okay. Oh, he is. Okay.
Over by the grocery store.
You ready?
Yeah, you too.
Ready? My name is LaVera Rose. My mother was Elsie Boyd. I'm a 4th generation biracial Lakota woman. My mother's mother was LaVera Schmidt Green, and I was named after her. thinking about all these names and noises, and I'm getting confused. Part of the reason that I'm so interested in this project is when I met Rose, she was doing research at the State Archives where I work. And we got to visiting one day, and I was telling her about my family and some of the names. And she said, gee, that sounds familiar. I know that name. I know this person. And she told me about a man named Felix Green, who turned out to be my grandmother's half-brother. And it was really interesting to me because my grandmother was a very devout Catholic, very Christian woman. She'd been to school in the East. She was born in the 1870s. And she was first Episcopalian, and later when St. Francis became prominent at Rosebud, she became Catholic. So to hear about Felix Green and to know that he was a medicine man was just really, first of all, just very shocking. I couldn't get over it. It was just amazing to me that these two people could be so different. And my grandmother had a very strong influence on her children. And she wanted them all to marry white people because she was afraid that the Indian race was dying. And she wanted them all to speak English. She didn't want any Lakota speakers in her home. And she understood quite a bit, but she didn't pronounce the words very well. And so the traditional people would laugh at her or, you know, joke when she spoke, and she stopped then completely because it was embarrassing for her. But her husband, my grandfather, was more traditional. And it's interesting to see how the effect of both of those people played on my mother's life. Later in life, she became a devout Catholic. And in the 70s, in the 80s, I had a reawakening. And I decided to go to ceremonies and learn about my Lakota culture. And so she called me her heathen because she was Catholic. She wanted me to go to church, and she didn't want me to go to ceremonies. She was very unhappy about that. But I went, and I learned all these things that I hadn't known before. And then as she grew older, she had a friend who spoke only Lakota when she came to visit, and my mother understood. She heard enough through her life when she was young that she understood, but she never spoke it. So she would speak in English, and my auntie would speak to her in Lakota, and they would laugh and have these conversations. And the older she got, the more she leaned back towards Indian religion, and she started telling me these stories about when she was a young child and the things that happened to her. And one of the things that happened to her was that she almost died at St. Francis. She got pleurisy, and she was sick for several months, and no one told my grandparents. They lived in Wood, and it was quite a ways away from St. Francis, and she almost died. And when my grandparents finally, someone was there at the hospital, and they went back and told them that she was there. So they came and got her, and they took her home, and my grandfather got someone to come, a medicine man, to come and pray for her, and they did ceremonies, and they gave her medicine, and she got well. But she didn't think about those things until a lot later in life when she was getting older. So it was really interesting to me to watch the change in her as she grew older. And so my great interest in this then is Felix Green and the connection between my grandmother and her brother. I'm also descended from Frenchmen who were at Fort Laramie, the Roubidoux and the Bissnets. So that's my lineage. My father is German, so I'm half German. I have some Cheyenne blood. I have relatives that are Oglala, and then I have Sichango at Rosebud. I also work at the State Archives, and I'm here as a representative for the State Historical Society to help in that capacity as far as the oral history project.
I think we want to take a break for just a minute, and what we can do, I don't know if everybody has a copy of this plan. I have some extras somewhere, but I thought you might want to share. We can pass the mic around another time. Do you want to turn it off? One has. Can you hear okay, Linda?
Like a leg.
You just want me to talk about my life or my ideas, my opinions, or what?
Introduce yourself. When you were talking, we all went around with that little mic and we introduced ourselves.
Oh, my name is Judy White Bull, and Hunkpapa from Standing Rock. And I live in McLaughlin. They call it Bear Soldier District. I'm into politics. I'm a diabetic, full-blown diabetic. I've been sober for 13 years, clean, no marijuana or cough syrup or pills. In fact, not too long ago, I just threw away a bunch of more pills. I lived in Little Eagle, South Dakota is where I was born. And my dad is from Little Eagle. His name is James White Bull. My mom is Sarah Running Hawk from Bullhead. And we lived way out in the country. And I remember those good old days when I was young, out in the country, running the hills barefoot. We got cactus out there. Never did have a run-in with cactus or snakes. Oh, when we run into rattlers, we stop and look at each other, and the snake go that way, and we go this way. We leave each other alone. Don't try to kill them or anything. Now, we swam with water snakes, cottonwoods. They never bothered us. And yet people are just in a hurry to kill them. As soon as they see one on the road, they poor things, they run over them. My parents were alcoholics. We went to Rapid City thinking they were going to do better over there, and it got worse. And I was so happy that we left the reservation. I had three younger sisters. Very happy that we left that reservation because we were being molested by relatives, men and women. And I was very happy to get out of there. So when we went to Rapid City, I thought everything was going to be all right, but my mom went to jail and she didn't come back for 30 days. And so Pierre Indian School came and took us. And then I was glad for that too. I was glad to get away from my mother. She never really was a mother anyway, or my dad. And we were to Pierre. We were over there for 5 years. Nobody came to claim us, so we just stayed there, and I was glad. I didn't want to come back. I wanted to stay there. I guess a lot of white people call that institutionalizing. But to me, that was my security, and I never had that before when I was young, so I really wanted to hang on to that. But eventually you get bigger and you have to go. So I went to another boarding school at Fort Yates, and I stayed there and I graduated from high school. And then I went to another boarding school, Haskell. I stayed there for 2 years and graduated there. And then I thought I had enough education now, so it's time to go to work. I did get a good job. I got married when I was 25. Lived in Europe with my ex-husband because he was in the military. And again, he was taking me away from that Rapid City mess where I was. And it seems like I'm always running, get away from here. Making those geographics so I don't have to deal with it. So I went all over. Divorce came, alcoholism came, and I did what I hated my mother about. I did it worse than she did. And then I wanted to be a truck driver. I've always wanted to do that. Even when I was little, I used to play with cars and stuff. So I did that. Got my license and started driving trucks, and then I got my own truck, and then I became a diabetic, so I had to let it all go. That was one of the culture shocks too, for having to let go of what I really loved, And I'm in politics now, but trucking is #1 in my life. If I could just go now, I would go. I was watching this new kid that was taking his test out there. And I'm standing there like expert duty, you know. Oh, don't do that like that, do it like this. I hauled just about everything you could think of: tankers, hazardous waste, dumps. So I got good at it. And that was one time in my life, it seemed like something came my way that I really wanted to do. And I let go of the alcohol, and I really started learning how to drive then. And I started learning how to control and take care of my life. And then when I had to come home, I had to let that go. And I had to make a complete career change. Well, I wanted to be a go-go dancer, but my age, I don't know. So they told me to park them boots, so I went to college and graduated, and I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I took marketing, and I was going to continue my trucking activities, and I went to this console, and that's where I ran into this roadblock, not been able to get past it. And I had a culture shock, 2-year culture shock. The education was so, I mean, I think most of my brain cells are gone from drinking, but this college here was no problem at all. It was just like 4.0, and then I did a 2-year course in one year, and maybe it's because of my age, what do you call it? Junkyard scholar? And
Life experience.
something like that would put me ahead of those other ones, but we had no culture here. Even my sisters didn't even speak it to me. Talk Indian. I said, well, I know at least they were talking Indian when I left. And I talked Indian until I was about 6 or 7 years old. And I learned how to speak English. So I thought, well, at least they're continuing that on the reservation. And then too, in the cities, we build up the Indian like we're so spiritual. We walk on water and causing rains, and they do that in California. They worship the ground you walk on. I had my way over there. But it's not like that on your own reservation. Your own people hate you for leaving, you know, for wanting a better life. I think there's lots of changes that have to be made. And a nation, oh my God, I don't know. I don't believe it. It's not a nation. We have too much to work on, and I don't understand why they don't catch on to these little things, like just railroad crossings and stuff. They can't deal with it. Oh, businesses they can't deal with. Culture, everybody complains about culture, and yet I don't see anybody doing anything. And me, what I'm doing right now is I want to change the system. I can't change people, I know that. But I sure can help change the system. So that's what me and Mary Louise and a group of us is doing right now. We want to change that Constitution so that it will apply to all the people and not just a selected few. That's going to be a lot of work coming up. Also concerned about it. And I think that if we do change that, this.
Hey,
Now you're busy.
But see, I moved this again, so.
no, it isn't that. It was this battery on the camera. That one's fine.
Where was I? Politics.
Changing the Constitution.
Yeah. I think that this guy went and read out all these problems that we have, alcoholism, suicides, and all that. And I think that if we do change the Constitution, we won't have that. we'll be in the pursuit of happiness, serenity, unity. I think this Constitution is going to really make a big difference if we do it right. We could look forward to tomorrow instead of wanting to kill ourselves or get a job somewhere else or go get married somewhere else and live there and that kind of thing. We could do a lot of things with this. So I'm impatient. She's slow, but we have to wait on her, so she is slow as molasses, but we get it done. So we got an injunction on that now, and well, we're going to right Friday or something.
Yeah, we have to come up with
Yeah.
$200 and file it, okay.
So anyway, that's what we're doing here, but housing situation, oh my God, I can't believe it. And I live in a big house by myself.
Not
And
by
they-
yourself.
Oh, well, no, I have all my dogs and cats. We'll get into that. Oh,
No, I think that's interesting, Judy. I think you should expound on that, you know, because that's something that's very cultural. That we were talking about that earlier. That our people don't treasure all life anymore. In the past, they respected all life, including plants and everything else.
water. And yeah, one day, puppy came into my life and I just couldn't say no. And then another one, and then another one, and then I liked them. I never did like them around me, but for some reason, I guess old age or something, you get better at it, you know. I like it. I like being 55 years old. I've never been 55, so I'm gonna enjoy it. Won't be long before I'm 56, older. And I like getting older, and that's why I like to be around the older people.
Oh, thank you.
Because, I mean, you know, because I was like gone for 30 years off the reservation and didn't want no part of it either. So when I did come back, you know, I was of different attitude, and I thought, well, I better start trying to learn something so that I could teach my grandchildren. I have a lot of grandchildren. And teach them something anyway that would make a difference in their lives someday. So I'm doing that right now. And the dog thing, I joined PETA. I don't know if you guys are familiar with PETA. People Ethical Treatment of Animals. And I brought all that. We were working on an ordinance because they have no dog and cat ordinances or pet protection or owner protection on a reservation. On our reservation, we don't. So I had workshops. We called it Gers and Purrs workshop. And then I taught how to properly take care of your animals. And then we gave free rabies shots, so everybody gave that way. And then plus they earned a college credit. And so I kept that up. We had pet parades at the powwows, you know. We even had a little cat that had a jingle dress on, and, you know, it was cute, you know. My dog had a big bow on her head, and she had a sweater on, and I wanted to get somebody to bless the animals at the powwows now, to pay more attention to our animals. And maybe a shelter, animal shelter, but I think education is better than a shelter. If I keep on pushing how to properly take care of them, they could start in their own homes, and maybe we won't even need one animal shelter. But then again, that's another thing, and really love my animals. One just got killed yesterday, a little puppy. We're not supposed to bury them in my backyard, but they're buried back there. we got a big mess at where I'm from. There's this burnt out cars, and it's like a ghetto. Well, I call it a ghetto. And yet our government has not made any changes for these people, or even at least to hire somebody to clean up that mess and teach them how to take care of their home. And what what shocked me was I came home and there, you know, we usually have like little white picket fences, you know, in the city or something like that. Come back, there's barbed wire fence in their yards. I couldn't believe that. I had a lot to learn. I had to slow down, I know that much. I was into technology and all that, and in California, and all of a sudden, it's like you get dropped from somewhere. But Standing Rock has a lot of work to do. And I'm glad there's work to do. I really don't want to ever get comfortable enough to say, well, I don't need to do this anymore. Because I know I have to be part of the rest of my life. And that's why I look forward to today, tomorrow, not to complain about it, and just go into it and do my thing. And now I've been holding AA meetings for 9 years now back home. I sit there every Sunday. I can't believe that. I'm able to discipline myself like that. That they said you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but that's not right. I can. I've learned a lot. Every day I learn more. So that's what's happening to me now. That's it.
Why don't you come sit where I am and introduce yourself? Right. You're all set together.
She didn't tell her.
Tell them who you are.
So what are you going to do with this information?
Well, I think that they're going to go on and they're going to be interviewing other people. And let's see, and then see.
Speak to them.
Yes, my name is Linda Quinones. I'm helping Rose Highbear out as we travel to do the oral history recordings. And I'm from Portland, Oregon, originally from Iowa. And I've been helping her the last 3 years in the various things that she's been working on, and helping her and assisting her. And I'm glad to be here today to meet all you different people. And I think this, what you're doing is for a very good cause, and for the preservation of the oral history, and it will help the children and the unborn children and the children to come in the future, and when they grow of age, to understand and all about the project. If they see it on video or if they hear about it, they'll be able to understand. And a lot of these traditions and histories of your different people have been lost, and I feel that it's really good to preserve the traditions of the different tribes of people, and it's something that shouldn't be lost. It's something that belongs to each and every one of you. And it's an honor to be here today to meet all you different people.
Or Steve, or Leonard, yeah. I didn't bring my copy with my notes on. But there's a couple of different, there's really, technically, you can break it down into two ways to do oral histories. One is that you do the research prior to, you sit down and you write down your questions and have a plan in mind. Then the other way is just to say, hey, I'm going out to interview people that are a resource and have history, and I want to kind of talk about this. And I want to hear the way they talk about that, and then just go do it. Part of the institute, I have the South Dakota Oral History Center, and I read a lot of the notes back when I started and stuff. But I remember one story in there that one of the interviewers was out on a reservation. I think he's up here, and he was interviewing some people that live way out, and he said he was making his field notes, he calls them. And one of the things he said in there that was really funny, he said, well, he said, you should always take your, what do you call that valise? He said, you should take that out there because you can use that to fight off the dogs. But, you know, one of the things I think that, well, I encounter that too, is making sure that I have a proper respect for the people that you're going to be talking to. And people understand that when you're going in there and you're not being pushy and all these kinds of things, but you're being pushy enough to get what you're working at. I looked at I think from a very legal standpoint, I have not taken the oral history project's forms in for a legal review in about 3 years. I think there's a couple of suggestions that I would make, and I have those on my sheet back in my office, and I can send those to you. But this is technical. That's one of the things that everybody forgets, and it's difficult too to do all the paperwork. But when I send field interviewers out and they come back, one of the hardest things to get them to finish is the paperwork, and it's important. It's real important because you're dealing with people's thoughts and their own ideas about life, and to me, I consider that precious. And you're the caretaker. You become the caretaker, really, of a generation. A couple years ago, we did a radio program. We just took some short clips out of these interviews and then put a story together about it. Boarding school, for instance. We did 5 minutes on boarding schools, and we had an Indian woman talked about her experience in boarding school. About, I think we didn't go over 150 words. And we did it on the radio, South Dakota Public Radio. And within a couple of days, I got a phone call from this woman. She said, you know, are you Leonard Bruguier? Yep. And she said, well, I was listening to the radio, and here I heard my mother's voice on the radio. Boy, in my mind, I'm thinking, oh man, you know, legally, you have an obligation to make dang sure that you have permission to use people's voices. Well, at the Oral History Center, our form says that. We give you a chance to say you can use it or you can't use it for public purposes. So, in my mind, I'm going over it like that. I'm thinking, boy, you know, we double-checked all this stuff to make sure we're legal, but maybe she had something. Well, she said, can I get a copy of it? And I said, well, certainly. She said, well, she said, I want to tell you, she said, you guys took that interview in '69, and my mother passed on in the '70s. And now I have children, and they've never heard their grandmother's voice. So I want that tape so I can play it for my daughters so that they can hear their grandmother's voice. So, you know, you never know about these kinds of things, how they're going to come back to you. Another time, one of our interviews was a former governor of South Dakota, and one of the researchers came down and went into those interviews and wrote an article for the Argus Leader damaging to the former governor. And they called me into my office at 8 o'clock, and they said, well, did you let this guy do the research? And I said, yep. Do you have the paperwork? Yep. We went through and checked it out legally, and we called the former governor and said, nope, they did it legally. And he said, okay, fine. He said, that's fine. He said, I can't do nothing. I said that, and I'll stand behind it. So there's different ways of handling oral history. The other part of that, legally, you get into what they call intellectual property. It's difficult now. It's still a very, there aren't any hard and fast rules legally on the use of these tapes. I always stay conservative. If I have a question or a problem, I just say no. That's the easiest way for me to do that. That way I'm not hurting somebody that gave us an interview. So I stay conservative on that, but the law, technically the law allows me to do that because they signed this form. So it's a matter of taste, I guess, and that is up to the administrator to determine those areas that are a little bit shady. But I think the concept is good, and I just don't remember all the notes I wrote. But I felt pretty good. You know, technically from an oral history project, and the legal parts, I think this fits in pretty good. I think you're in pretty good shape. Well, like I said, on questions, you know, here's what happens on that. We had a man that did some interviews for us, and I wasn't there at that time. And he was that way. He would write all these questions down, then he'd go to talk to these people, and he did all the research. Well, he would go in there and he'd say, well, and this is the way he talks. My name is Keith Roethlisberger, and I want to ask you a question about, you know, he'd ask a question after saying about 500 words, and the person he was talking to say, yep. That's all the interview is the interviewer. When in fact, you're interviewing another person. You should be saying one word, they should be saying 500. So you kind of get into, when you do the questions and stuff, you have to be very careful of that, that you're letting that other person do the talking versus yourself. And we do, you know, that's kind of a skill. When I do interviews, what I usually do is I make a list. I know where I'm going with it, what I want with that interview. I make a little list and memorize it, and just carry it in my mind in case we get off. When you talk to people, you know, sometimes, well, start right off with your machine. Some people are very not comfortable with the machine, so what I always do is I take 3 or 4 extra tapes, and I will get my machine going while we're just talking, getting started. And then after a while, I'll stop that and rewind it and play it back and let them listen to their voice. A lot of people haven't heard their voice from a tape and stuff, you know, and they'll get all kind of excited about it and that kind of deal. But the more stuff you do to take away from that other person, I always think that's the less that you get on your tape about that individual. you have to be very careful about that. I always run it through, and sometimes I'll even do an interview with myself, because I like to talk. Do an interview with myself just to make sure that I'm very comfortable and prepared, so that any holdup or anything with an interview is not going to be caused by me. The questions, like I said, my gosh, you know, we can talk about the old stuff and old stuff and old stuff, but I really think we need to start thinking about tomorrow. And when I was, and I think Jim said it well, it wasn't like your grandparents and they were teaching you so much as they were showing you a way of life. But what happens is we depend on our elders to tell us about the old stuff. I like to hear them talk about the new stuff. You know, the TVs, the cars, heck today the internet, computers, how they see that fitting into Indian life and how we can use it. They can still think, you know. If you ask them the question, how is the internet going to affect Indian country? Ask them the question. Don't be afraid of it. Say, hey, you know. And if they say, well, I don't know, what do you mean internet? Is that what I drive on or what? You know, you say, well, computers, and they'll start thinking about it. And I think that's where you take wisdom. That's how you use wisdom, is to pose the question to an elder or somebody with wisdom and ask them for the next stage. I think we depend too much on old stuff and then personal interpretations. I think what we need to do is start saying, hey, you know, if you get some really old people, for instance, my mom, she had real big trouble with that. She moved out, but they had Yankton Sioux put up elderly housing, and it was easy for my mom because she had diabetes and she couldn't walk too good, so she was on a wheelchair, and they had accessible, and then everything was centralized. It was easy for her, but you couldn't have grandchildren there. So she said, no, you know, this is crazy. She moved back into the house, and then we put a ramp up for her, and so that she could do, it was easy. We made the house easier for her. But she thought about it. You know, she moved out of that elderly thing. Again, I think that's what's happening here is our elders are being divorced from their duties and obligations. But we as parents, we have obligations too that we need to be aware. But we need to ask them, well, what do you think about that? What do you think about being put in an elderly place where you can't have your grandchildren? And I think even now too, we have Indians that are snowbirds, we call them. You know, they come up here and live for 3-4 months when it's really nice, and then when it gets cold up here, they take off and go to Arizona and New Mexico and those places. They have snowbird. Yeah. But see, that's come about because of all these changes. You know, we have our conception of our Indians. When we talk about the past, we have that old conception. Here's another thing that always, my mom, she made us excel in school. That was her thing. She said, you got to read, these kinds of things. But when she had a house on the reservation, they give her a house, or I mean, I don't know how they go about that. But every 2 years, us boys had to go and we had to paint that house. We had to go through and clean it. We put up the fence, we made the lawns. She did the flowers, but we took care of the lawns. And we maintained that house. But boy, you know, I see folks today now, they get, well, I wished I could get a house. I can't afford a house living outside the reservation. I have a rent. Well, I wished I could get one of those really nice houses. I'd have that house to be just clean and everything. Well, I always think about that, you know, when I go out Yankton Reservation, my cousins, and they get nieces and nephews to get, the tribe builds them a new house. Geez, in 2 years it looks like the ghetto. Oh boy. Why? Why? Why is it like that? And then, here's what really ticks me off about that. All them cousins and nephews of mine, they're carpenters, they're plumbers, they're electricians. They can do all that stuff. You go in their house and they got one electrical outlet, and then they got one of those 59-cent GE things with about 8 different things stuck in it. You know, I think, boy, your house is gonna burn down one of these days and stuff. But why? You know, why don't we apply what we know back to things? But those are the kinds of things I like to think about. How the elders think about this next generation coming up, how they conceptualize themselves in it. I always think of the elders as being the professoriate of our different tribes. They know all this stuff, but they're not teaching us some of it. They're not teaching us some of it. Maybe they thought the schools could do that, but I ask the questions, but I don't get satisfactory answers from them. They always say, well, you're too white. Well, I have a lot of white characteristics, and I have a lot of cultural traits that are white, but there's a lot of things that I really think that the white people have that are good, too. And there's a lot of good Indian things there. There's some good Hassapa things, all of that. I work with Chinese people. But they stay very racial. They stay very racial. They think in terms of everybody else's toka or others, but then as Sioux, we're the best, but then we're not being taught the right things. It's interesting. I think it's pretty cool. But that wasn't very technical, and I talked way too long. I talk too much.
Hand it over to Jim.
Jim?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that-
I guess, you know, and looking at the questions and various other things, I guess, that have been going through my mind before I got here, and in listening to Leonard talk, I think it kind of made some things connect. And about interviewing people with a recording device, and also the attitude and the feelings of some of our people. Again, you get into this idea of, I don't know what all is connected with it, but some of it, I suppose, is this thing that some of us are in cultural shock about. And whether it goes back to the old saying or what, I don't know, but they always say, those who don't talk know, and those who talk don't know. You know, and I think that, you know, that from our history, there's been a lot of that going on. You will hear some of the old people say, they'd say, somebody just now learned something, so boy, they're really expounding on it. Or other things, and I've had some experience, you know, sometimes I get tired of that whole hour of talking. I try to ask some of my friends, especially among the older people, if they would like to say a few words. And my grandfather did once. I have a clan grandfather who's still alive. He lives there at Fort Yates. He's 96, going to be 97 this fall, and he's very, very aware and physically doesn't have any incapacities. And he did, and then all of a sudden he quit. He said, no, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to do this again. He said, he said, you know, I say these things and a lot of people hear it and they don't like me. I'm old now, and he said, I just want to go to my grave at peace with everybody, is the way he put it. But I guess in my own feeling, I sense that somebody kind of put the screws to him. I don't know, but you know, this is again something that I feel I sense. So then the project, I think, is necessary, and I think, you know, you made one point, okay, talking about something old, something that happened before. You go with a set of something. Sometimes I go to see him and I want to know something. Well, I learned very early, a long time ago, when I was working at the college way back in the 80s, early 80s, that when I want to know something from him, when I go there, that's the furthest thing from my mind. The last time I went to visit him, oh my God, he had Ken Starr on his mind. So he was talking about all that in Dakota. So we went through Ken Starr, what was going to happen with that, and so forth. And so I kind of told him too in Dakota. He said, "Tak, when I got insia kedach historieshni chatakto honkik tishnina checha." See, my grandpa leans toward the other side. He's a Republican. I said, you know, I don't think Ken Starr has anything really solid, which is why he hasn't done anything yet. He said, well, I thought they were going to get rid of the president, but they're not. But, you know, okay, so we go through all that stuff. Eventually, then, when something's kind of along in the line of what I want to know, why then that's when I zero in on it and ask him the question that I wanted to know. Otherwise, if I ask him directly, I don't even think he'd even think about it. So I found that out, and I did that a lot then, and he really has been a lot of help to me because, you know, indirectly he'll tell me some of the most interesting things. I mean, he, as a sideliner, I mean, like he was telling me about a relative of his. His grandma told him that one of her brothers had to be on a horse doing a wiwangachipi during the day and night ceremony, why the horse had to be part of the ceremony, and so forth, you know. But that came up with us something else. So then that's a learning thing. But it wasn't that this is like it is, this is what you're supposed to do, etc. None of that was said. So I think that the interviewers are going to have to really be tuned into this in order to get something of substance from whoever they will talk to. The other thing, I don't know how it is, but I don't know, maybe Judy thinks it's otherwise too, but you know, Rose, the other thing I think is that whoever said Indians don't want to get money and be paid, that's not true. I think if your interviewers can go there with something, they can give them right at the time they talk to them. And preferably money, I think, would be much better. And they would be much more, because, I mean, let's face it, some of them are sitting there with grandchildren who need Pampers. If you have the money right then and there to give to them, they will be more apt to talk to you. Don't you think so,
yes,
Judy?
Money talks.
And I think that this is something that you'll have to kind of, I don't know if it require you to revise your program or what, but I think you're going to have to really consider that seriously.
Ironically enough, we put in the money for the Pendleton blankets and they were cut from both projects. We had to do some fundraising. In fact, that's why some of you didn't hear from me. I had to totally stop the whole project to try to raise the matching funds and try to come up with honorarium. So we're a very skinny project when it comes to money. We were able to get some beautiful Pendleton blankets, however, you know, and that does mean something, but coming up with the funds, we'd have to figure out how, maybe like out of our gas money, and we didn't have gas money in our budget, but we've got gas money on the reservation. We'd have to steal from another part of the budget because they cut our funds so badly. One of them cut us, I think, $1,800 or something, and I don't work. I don't have, what do you call it, income. I work full-time on this project. So I'm kind of a poverty person, but knowing how that is, you know, every time I go to Eagle Butte, I'll give Martin's children $20, and they really do appreciate that. It's usually all I can give, it's just a small amount. But maybe there's a way that we can figure out how to do it, you know, give them at least like $20 or something when we go there, just so they've got some grocery money. We were planning on taking food in, you know, cooking a nice soup and maybe a pie when we go to visit. It's not a financially rich project.
I don't know. I think that, you know, like some groups in the, among, well, on my Hadassah side, you know, that would be more apropos when you're really doing some really, really very historically traditional things. Like my friend, one of my friends there is the guardian of certain of the seeds, and those seeds cannot be bought from her, you know. But again, like among our people, I just think that, and I just think too that it goes back a long way. Scholars have come in, they've taken advantage, and I just don't know, but I just think that that's going to be an area that's going to be very, very troublesome.
People always think that someone's going to get
And
rich
see,
and
and
that
then,
they didn't
well,
use
see,
it.
and I mean, like on Standing Rock at the college last summer, I know for some reason it offended me very, very drastically. They had these two guys from the University of Indiana, Parks and Demali, who came in there. Great big stuff, books and everything else. They were trying to pick our brains, and you know, and they didn't give us very much. Yet, you know, they got a big wad. You know, and so how do we deal with that? And I guess we have to look at that in connection with this project too. It is, I mean, it is something. I mean, we need to do that to understand how did our ancestors learn? How did they learn how to be civilized human beings? But how can we, and see, I'm disappointed in the Humanities Council of North Dakota that they would not realize. Because, I mean, they pay, what's his name, a big wad for lying in terms of Thomas Jefferson or Lewis and Clark and all their BS, you know. But it really is a problem.
Yeah, I was disappointed. And I have taken my project on with no intention of ever making any income from it, because I believe that when someone takes an income off of something, you know, you can't really do the project and really take money from it at the same time. Not this kind of work. But I think that a lot of people get kind of distorted about the money aspect. They always think that there's going to be a lot of money to be made. I'm not so sure that I mean, that isn't something I focus on, but I think that it is something that a lot of elders would focus on, and I was cautioned about that by someone. I can't remember who I was speaking with now. But people are going to think that we're going to be rich and that they were not, you know, no money was given to them. I kind of regret that. But at the same time, we kind of have to focus on the purpose of this is for the values to be brought back up again and talked about. Some of the memories of what our grandparents said when it came to this conflict or that difficulty, how they responded in a generous way with their spirit. We kind of have to put aside this whole monetary world and focus on those values. I appreciate what you're saying, and I agree with you. I know there were times when we were homeless twice. We simply didn't have enough money to pay rent on a place, and we lived in a little travel trailer, or we would just simply be going to help people. And money was always appreciated. And you know, what I could do is, I don't know if it's insulting to give people $20. You know, that's what I don't know. But I don't know how I can stretch it beyond that, because what I'm going to have to do is like get an advance maybe off my Visa card, which I got for this, and just take some withdrawals and at least give them $20, because I agree totally. we were always gifting Martin's family when we went to see him, give him a little bit more, little bit of cash. Wasn't always a lot, but we understand how difficult it is. Thank you for sharing that. But the blankets are beautiful. The blankets that we're planning to give. It's a new item from the line of Pendleton this year, and we've been friends with the head of Pendleton's blanket division, Bill Nance. Martin blessed their medicine keeper blanket back in '94 or so. And so Bill gave us a very special price on the Pendletons. And, we felt that that might be more valuable than the money. I think they cost something like $140 out here for a blanket, and Bill sold these to me for $55 each, plus the cost of transportation to get them out here. But I'll do that. I'll use my visa in that way. We did raise matching funds from the AHAB colleges. We called the libraries of the AHAB colleges and told them what we were doing, and that we were required to raise matching funds. And I'm not much of a fundraiser, but we offered them a set of the collection for $200, the South Dakota collection. And so they were very, I think most of the colleges, maybe there were one or two that were not interested or were not able to buy. But they're being supportive of that because they see the value of it, you know, where the Indian students are going to college. So that's where we were able to raise enough funds to even qualify to get the money from the Humanities Council, because they have colleges. Maybe that money could be redirected or something.
Rose, do you have a date
In my computer, yeah, if I could hook my computer up to your printer somehow, I could probably get an up-to-date budget. I'd have to look at it and see. I think what South Dakota did is they kept everything in there just as it was, except they took the blanket money out. North Dakota was more heavy with slashing. They cut a third of the project, which I forgot that they do that when you apply for grants, because I haven't done grant writing. I would have put some muscle in there, but it was kind of a skin and bones project. I didn't give money to myself to travel out here, but I included travel money on the reservation. So there's not many places to borrow from.
Because in here it says that there's for cooking there's $20.
Yeah, we wanted to, the elderly nutrition program, I felt we needed to, wouldn't we need to pay them to make some soup and things for us? Yeah, there's money there. Do you think they value the $20 more than making some soup and pie and or fried bread or something?
Well, I don't know about elderlies up here, but boy, back down in Yankton, they're on this, they're into this diet. They don't eat fat. They don't eat fried bread anymore.
Yeah.
Fruits and all that kind of stuff.
Well, we could take a basket of food and spend $20 off. And I think, I haven't looked at that South Dakota budget for a while, but there was two places. There was money that we were giving to the fiscal manager, fiscal sponsor, and then I think there was something like $400 for the project manager. That's what where we were going to take our food money, so we could take it from there for the cash. Maybe we could do that. Did you have more thoughts? No.
Can I say something? I work as
You want to hold that?
I work as a homeschool coordinator in McLaughlin, that public school they have there. And I have records of all the Indian students who are enrolled and their enrollment numbers and all their shots and all that stuff, you know. And I was going through all that, and here there's like 96% are Indian and the rest are all white. And out of that 96 Indians, there's only 6 that are full-bloods, and the rest aren't. The rest are a mixture of another tribe or white or black or all that, you know. And I don't think, I think the answer is not to, it cannot come from the homes, this culture, though it should. But nobody's making that effort. We got a lot of alcoholism and drug activity going on, and I think that has to be stopped first, but that takes a long time. Like in AA, we have a revolving door. You know, don't let it kick you in the butt as you're going out. And we have no books, no guidelines, no nothing. And then when the elders do speak, one talks this way and the other one talks that way. No, we didn't do it that way. This is the way it was done. Kind of, we wanted to get a log house, a round house. Round house. They used to have a long time ago, and they could sit there and they could say anything they want to, and people would just sit there and listen to you. Could go on for days and days, you know, about what they wanted to talk about. And I wish we could have that again. You know, even though I can't sit for very long, you know, I have to get up and move around. But the idea of being able to come back in and be part of that again, you know, because I like for people to listen to me. I feel like I'm part of and like I'm contributing something, you know, at least today. I'm thinking about we have a certified Lakota language teacher. And so then I wanted to get her to start teaching in the fall. So we have to do grants writing and get her a position there at the school. Somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to get started, and let's go do it. You know, instead of saying, the parents got to do it, the homes, the churches, and they're not doing it. It's not getting done. And talk is cheap. And I'm just sick of all that talk. This is like talk all the time wherever I go. Nobody getting into action, and you know, I got these ideas. Let's go do it. And if it works, good. If it doesn't, then try something else. There'll be plan A, plan B, and plan C, you know. So there will be no failure, or people can't say, well, we told you, you know, it's not going to work. But at least, you know, the language is what's going to keep us together. She says land, but my opinion, language to me is what's going to keep us going. Even though she talks D, I have a little poodle named Galala. He won't let me cut him, so he's like a shag, like a little sheepdog. So I call him Galala face. Well, she comes over and calls him Gadada face. So guess who's calling him Gadada face now? Me.
You guys have, what is it, a poodle?
A who?
A poodle?
Something, I don't know.
Poodle.
Poodle.
No, it's a poolie.
Poolie?
I'm like, isn't that Lakota say that?
They said, they told me too, some of those guys, they said, Judy, how come you have all those dogs out there? You getting ready for your opila? Oh, I could just kill them when they talk to me like that. We gotta watch you, Judy. You might throw a cat in. Don't do that, you know. I got lots of cats too. But I'm an animal advocate, and gee, there's a lot of people don't have a compassion for animals. God, I had a really good experience with the deer. We killed a deer, and my cousin Jerry came over and he cut it. He told me how to exactly he cut it in such a way, all I had to do is pull that. Didn't even hardly need any strength, you know, to pull that deer, the skin off of it. And he showed me every which way, what it was for and what we did, and we took a bite of it. And then on a deer's leg, I don't know, right here, there's a little, no, it's like a little, like a little pouch right here. And he said that was something sacred, but he couldn't quite understand about that. But I wanted to. I don't think I'll eat deer anymore, though. We opened it up. We opened the wound part, and here there was 2 babies in there. Oh, I'm not gonna eat deer anymore. I don't like the taste of it anyway. As you see, I'm a white Indian, so I like store-bought stuff.
That
And,
goes back to when they started rationing beef. And they used to talk about they didn't like the taste of the beef. They didn't like the taste of the meat. Because they were so used to eating different things that when they brought in this new meat, they didn't like the smell of it or the taste of it.
No, I like
Now
buffalo.
it's just the reverse of that.
I like buffalo though. Cha-cha.
Why grew up we ate a lot of animals.
I don't like animal.
Very
Tastes
few deer,
funny.
because it's kind of
The
scarce.
only deer that's hard for me to eat is the black-tailed deer. That's different. Even the way the meat, when you're gonna make dried meat out of it, it's different, you know? Looks different.
So I think if you're gonna get anything going here, you're gonna have to get into the homes. Yeah. If they don't want to come here, you gotta go over there.
We're planning to go to their homes. Jim and his grandmother came up with these are some of the elders here on this reservation who, is it true, Jim, they all said they would?
I'm not sure. She gave me this list, and I know she's talked to some of them and others that she hasn't talked to yet.
Uh-huh.
But